All right, hi everyone. So this is the CSS tutorial. Um, I'm gonna go through a bit. Well, you can see what I'm gonna talk about. But I'm gonna go through a bit of HTML really quickly, just in case people don't know it that well, and then I'll jump into all of the CSS stuff. So starting off, first HTML, right? Everything is surrounded by an HTML tag. HTML file, if you just look at, if you just kind of look at it, it's pretty simple. I think everything is in a tag, right? So if you look, like, this is CSS tutorial. It's in what we call like a header tag, so it's h1. Um, and so if I like change this, just like or I'll get rid of CSO, then notice how it says like CSS now. So it's pretty simple. We have H1 elements, we have P elements. So if you look at it, I currently don't have any CSS on the page. So this is literally just HTML. So by default, obviously they have a little bit of CSS just so it doesn't look horrific. So a lot of things on this document are wrapped in divs. So divs are just kind of like containers that you put things in. They don't actually do anything until you format them. But that's that's what the div is. It also splits things up pretty nicely. As you notice, I have a lot of divs named container. I'll explain that later. But yeah, I put everything in a div. Then H1 is for the headers. So like the titles, these are H2 elements. So there's actually H1 through 6, and they just get smaller. I think down here I use, yeah, this is H3. Yes, so then we have P tags. P tags. So these are just paragraphs, right? So it's just all this block text. I think those are the three most common ones. Then we also have this. So UL stands for unordered list, and then LI stands for list item. If I make this OL, OL is ordered list. Save, yeah, and then it has a numbering thing. I'm gonna keep it untitled or unordered for now. Yes. Let's see, what else do I have? And then we have buttons too. Did I add a button on this? Oh, here we go. So a button, it's, well, it's with the word button. It's very self-explanatory. And then finally we have A. So A is actually a link. And that's what it is. Yeah, it's just a hyperlink element. So it has an href property, which is just like where it goes to. So kind of to explain properties, every element has a set of properties, right? So if you look at this div, it has a class name and an ID. Yeah, that's pretty much it for like for the divs, the P tags and the H1 tags. Those are like generally the only things you'll see on there. For buttons, where did my button go? For buttons, you can add an onClick tag, and it'll execute some JavaScript. So like alert hi. So if I save that and I click it, it'll say hi. So yeah, there's you can add basically events, and actually you can add events to anything technically. But generally you want to stick with buttons that have click events. Okay, yeah, that's pretty much it. And then in this top section, this is basically like information for your site, right? So like when a browser gets it, this is the first thing it reads. So all these meta tags are like metadata. So like, oh, okay, I'll just go through everything I have here. This is like some default things. So Charset, this is like what character set you use. Generally use UTF-8 or 16. This one's actually pretty important because it will scale everything based on the size of your screen. This one is Internet Explorer because it needs this. Essentially, it's just saying that like you need Edge for it to work because like there's older versions. These are actually pretty cool. So links, you can basically link to resources. So I have two links, and you can see rel is like the name of like, or like what the link is. So the shortcut icon is the favicon. If you look at the top, I don't know if you can see it, there's a tiny duck. I drew really quickly, but yeah, it looks like that. You save it in a favicon.ico file. You don't need the V2, but anyways, and then type image X icon. Generally, this is like a pretty standard thing. You can find it. Like if you ever want to add a favicon, just search up like how to add a favicon. And then this is probably the most important line for this tutorial because it will include our index.css file. So all of that goes in the head. Oh yeah, and then the title. The title is basically what shows up on the tab, right? So if I add like very cool, now I'll say very cool here. And so yeah, that's on the title tag. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a lot of like, oh, okay, wait, and then one last thing. So right. So you have the head section, and then you have what we call the body section. Body section is basically everything else, everything that's shown on the page. And at the very bottom, I have a script. So let's say you wanted to have some JavaScript for your site, you can include it down here using src, which is just like the location of the script. And so right now, all my files are everywhere. Do you have to worry about the other files? Generally, these would be in like a folder together. But yeah, we have index.html, CSS, and JavaScript. So yeah, cool. And then here's something interesting. So then people ask like, why don't I just put everything in divs, right? Because like divs can hold all sorts of things. Like why do we have to use h2 and p and stuff? And it's because, this is just a random Wikipedia page, but anyways, if you I don't know what it is on Chrome, but you can toggle a reader view, and so if like people have a hard time reading things, this will essentially look at all of the p tags, all the h1 tags. These are like table tags, and it will like format it in a way that like is more readable. Yeah. Let's see. And then I talked about importing. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's HTML. If there's anything very specific, okay, just as a brief note before I start going to CSS, if there's like, don't try and memorize everything that I'm saying. The best way to learn and like how I actually know how to do a lot of this stuff is just through practice. Once you write enough pages, then you just start to learn things. And honestly, most things these days can be Googled anyways. So yeah. Okay, box model. So this is like a pretty picture, but this is kind of the basis of all the formatting that I'm gonna do, especially in terms of like the borders and, well, the spacing, right? So notice how there are 4 sections. So the very inside is just the size of the thing. So actually, I'm going to show you one of them. Okay, here we go. So if I hover over this title element, you can see how like there's a blue section and then there's a yellow section. So the colors don't really match up with this picture. But anyways, so the blue section is the actual object itself. So it's our width and our height, right? And then we have padding. So padding is part of the object. So actually, I'm gonna just start formatting now that I'm explaining all this. Well, don't worry about all the like a bunch of the things I'm doing. I'll just explain like the margin and stuff. So right now, this is an image container, or just an image element, right? And you can see like at the top it says 566 by 400. So I haven't changed that in any way. Oh wait, actually, give me a second. Let me change it so it's the image I put. Box model. This one. And that doesn't work. Okay. Anyways, let's just use this. So I'm just gonna format this image. Let me have a class name, class box image. I'll explain all this stuff later, but so we have this little box thing, right? Let's say I want to give it a background. Actually, you can't see the background. Wait, give me a second. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna format this H2 thing. Box model title. Yes, okay. Dot box model title. So I guess we can go back to this thing. So again, right-click, inspect element. This is like the best way to debug things. So right now, this actually has a built-in margin because the H2 by default has a margin. So let's say I just want to set the margin. Margin is 10 pixels, let's say, right? And so if I save and reload this, hello. Hello. Oops. CSS. Okay, well, okay, well, I'll just add it here. So if, I don't know why my style sheet doesn't work, but you can also directly like put it in the HTML, right? So if you just add style tags, it should ID equals, oh, oops. That's an ID. So he's using classes. Okay, here you go. So if you look at the title now, notice how the yellow thing kind of changed. So basically now the margins on this thing are all 10 pixels. Let's say I want to set the width to 100 pixels. Well, now it's pretty small, but notice how now it says 100 by 56. If I also set the height to, let's say, also 100 pixels, I press save. Now if you look at it, the entire element is 100 by 100 with a 10 pixel margin. And so the margin is like the thing on the outside. Oh wait, actually I should probably start from padding. So if I give it a padding, actually, a padding of 10 pixels. So, well, I didn't get rid of the margin, but the padding is actually inside of the object itself. I guess this will help more. If I give it a background color, not horrible background color. Okay, whatever. So let's say I had a background color, right? If you see, the padding or the background color actually goes over the padding. And so, yeah, so the padding, I mean, this is like a good example, right? If you want the background, if you want like part of the background to be colored too. So if I made this margin instead, notice how like this is like now touching the edge of the background. It's kind of ugly. So yeah, border is pretty self-explanatory, right? It's the border. It's let's make it 1 pixel solid and then black, right? So now we have a 1 pixel border. That's kind of hard to see. Let's make it 5 pixels. So there's a 5 pixel black border. And so now our thing is like actually coming to shape. Like with this, you can probably format a ton of things to look slightly better. Let me just add the margin of 10 pixels back so we can see the full box model. Yeah, so actually, if you're like looking around, this actually does show the box model, and Chrome. I think this is what Chrome's looks like. Anyways, so we have 100 by 100. Then you have the padding, which is 10 all the way around. And you can actually see the numbers on here. The border is 5 pixels, and then the margin is 10 pixels. So that's the box model, and all elements will follow that. Yeah. Let me reorganize this. Okay, cool. So that's pretty nice. Like, look, this title looks more snazzy than before. Anyways, so what am I doing? Or like, how did I do this? And why did I mess up the first time? So if you look at the element I just made, I added an ID tag. So this is actually very important because an ID, well, it's like a variable name, right? So how do you reference this element? You can't just say like H2 with the name the box model. So instead we have to give it an ID. And so to reference an ID, use that pound symbol. Yeah. Oh, wait, actually, I do have examples here. So let's say I wanted to format all divs, right? Yeah, that's fine. Let me actually make these P's, just because I have a lot of random divs. Uh, so, oh no, I forgot how to do it. Okay, I'm just gonna make this one a P element. So if this is a P element, and let's say I wanted to like change all the P elements so they're like the same. Um, so I guess one of the best examples of this is since P elements hold text, right? We can change the font of every P element. So if you want to reference elements, you could just reference them directly, right? So I could have like H1 here, or like H2, or P. So then the way to change font, so VS Code is nice because it shows you all the properties. And there's a lot of random ones that I've never touched in my life. But the important one is font size, font family, and font weight sometimes. So font family, it recommends a lot of fonts, but we're gonna go with the best font, Comic Sans MS. Press save, and now every P item is in Comic Sans, which is really cool. And I don't know why it's named MS, I think that's Microsoft. And actually, if you saw the suggested font families, again, VS Code suggests a lot of these. Now that's how they have multiple. And so let's say your computer doesn't have Comic Sans for some reason. You can add another one. So like, if my computer didn't have Comic Sans, it would fall back to sans serif, which is like one of the defaults. But yeah, it looks like that. It's kind of ugly. But it makes sure it's not, or it makes sure if Comic Sans doesn't work, then it won't go back to something that's like this. But yeah, so that's the P tag. And all of these, if you notice, regardless of the classes or the IDs that I added, all of these are P's, right? So they'll all be modified by this one thing. So then the next, I guess, modifier that is applied to it is the class name. So an interesting thing, or the reason why I have classes and I have IDs is you can only have one class, or no, you can only have one ID. So like nothing else can be named selectors. Like this one's named training selectors, this one's named box model, but none of them are named selectors. Now, the class, on the other hand, you can have as many things as you want in the same class, right? So like all of these are containers, and we'll format that actually in a second. But notice how these two have the same class. So they should look the same. However, this one don't have a class, so this one shouldn't match all of these. So let's say, oh wait, yeah, to reference a class, use the dot, or period, or whatever you want to call it. I named it important div. So in these, you can have, I'm pretty sure, all like the standard variable things, and you can also have dashes. In a lot of programming languages, you're not allowed to use that for like variables. But yeah, this one is fine. And actually, most people like using dashes. I would not suggest using camel case. So what are we gonna do? We can make, okay, so remember how I use background color? If you're to change the text color, you just use the word color. It's a little strange. But anyways, let's say I want to make it like bright red, right? So now this class called important div is now bright red. Red is kind of scary, so let's make it, that's worse. Let's make it magenta. See, like now it's magenta. This looks like one of those, oh my, Comic Sans magenta. Anyways, so now all of these are going to be defined, or all of the ones that are defined with the class important div are going to be this color, right? So these two are the same. However, I'm going to change the format of this one again. Selector one, selected one. So this is an ID, or yes, this is an ID. So again, everything can only have one ID. So let's say for this div specifically, again, remember referencing IDs using the pound symbol. For this div specifically, let's say I want to make it bigger, right? So font size, that doesn't spell size. Font size, So actually, if you saw, like, same with the colors, that's how it's like coral and black. There's a lot of built-in ones. However, you can also specify your own, and I'll explain a bunch of random measurements later. Let's say I want to make it really big, 50. Hello. Oh, I didn't. Hello. Oh, okay, yeah, here we go. So yeah, now this one is like massive. uh, and so if you notice, this actually, you can see it down here. And here's another thing. So in rules, you can actually see this has all of the previous selectors. And let's say I wanted to add a font size to this too. Let's make this 30 pixels. So if I add a font size to this, notice how it's applied. Inspect on it again. Oh, it does not say. Oops. Okay, yeah, so here we go. On Firefox, and I think Chrome does this too, it'll tell you that it's like being filtered. And it's saying basically, yeah, this one, the ID overrides the class name. So that's like selector specificity. So the least specific is like the element name, and then it would be the class CSS and then the ID CSS. So that's like how it would override. But let's say, let's say I wanted everything to always be 30 pixels. You can add an important tag. And so this would basically override it the other way. And so now the ID is always going to be 30 pixels because it's important. If you have two importance, then they kind of cancel each other out. And so, yeah. So, yep. And then it changes again. Okay. Yes. So that's how selectors work. So then the next thing is chaining selectors. So we saw how our selectors are basically, well, we have the basic ones, right? So you can select the one that has an ID. Yeah, you can select everything that has this class, and you can select all the P elements. But let's say, let's say you want to select all the P elements inside of this div, named my box. Actually, I'm gonna give this an ID. So everything inside of the div, the my box div, right? So how would you do that? Well, that's why our chaining selectors comes in. And actually, there's a lot of different ways to chain things. But the most basic, and I think the most used one, is just the space between them. So if I have dot my dash box and then p. So this basically says, oh, actually, it shows you, but essentially it's if there is a p inside of my box anywhere, then apply this format. So even if I had like another div, right, surrounding this one, it would still apply. So basically all of the p's inside of my box, or all the p elements inside of this div will have this formatting. So let's say I wanted to make it, let's just go with color again, because color is the easiest to see. I'm gonna use another another way to define color. RGB 23, 44. I definitely knew what color that was. And so now, is that cool? Oh wait, there's an ID. Oops, I did it again. There you go. So now it's slightly different. That's not different enough. Let me make it radically different. 223. There you go. Oh, now it's just green. But yeah. So notice how, even though this is also a P element, it only formatted the one inside of my box. If I make another div, that's like your box. This won't be formatted. Notice how the thing inside your box is also not formatted because it doesn't have, it's not inside of this specific one. Okay, the chain things is if we have multiple classes. So this can only be applied to class, right? Because in addition to allowing multiple elements per class, you can also have multiple classes in an element. So let's say I want this to be dog and cat. P class is equal to dog. So let me just get rid of all this. Oh yeah, so this one is both dog and cat. This one is only dog. So let's say I wanted to apply something to dog, right? So text color will be brown, right? So now, oh, did it get overridden? Oh, it does. Oops. Okay, let me just move it on. Okay, yeah. So now they're both brown because they both have the dog class. However, this one also has a cat class. And let's say I wanted to select everything that has, oh wait, actually, I should do this. P class is equal to cat. So this is only cat. So let's say I want things that only have cat to have a border of like 10 pixel, or no, 1 pixel solid green. Right, so now, yeah, so now notice how like this has both the formatting of dog and the formatting of cat. While this one only has the formatting of cat and this one only has the formatting of dog. So now what if I wanted to say, oh, format only the one that has both? Well, if you actually just combine the class names, right, so don't put a space in, this will check for both classes. So let's say I want to make this actually background color. Background color is blue. So now this background color is blue. That's horrific. Is there better blue? Aquamarine. Oh yeah, so now this one is like aquamarine, right? And it only applies to the one that has both tags. So yes, that's another way to chain them. And those are like the two most used and like the only two that you'll really, really definitely need. There's a few other ones like sibling. But yeah, I'm not going to explain those. Okay, cool. So next is units. So for all of these, I've just been using pixels, if you notice. However, there's more than just pixels. So I've written a few out here. So I'm just going to go through and format all of these. So first we have pixels, right? Pretty simple. Actually, really quickly, I'm going to give unit dash box background color. I'm just gonna set the background color so you can see it a little better. There we go. They all have background color, margin 10 pixels, and then width is fit. Can I do that? Oh no. With auto. Okay, yeah. Doesn't do anything. Okay, so now you can see exactly where each one is. So for the pixel box, I'm going to set its height. Actually, I think I'll just change all their heights. So this one will be, the height will be 20 pixels. Right? That's too short to see. 30 pixels. So this one is explicitly defined by pixels. So if I hover over it and you look at the layout, it is 100, which is set here, by 30. And so yeah, I think I already did that. So REM box. So this one, I'm going to define the height by relative, what does EM stand for? Doesn't tell me. Whatever. Basically, EM is essentially the font size. So I think the default font size is, I'm trying to remember. Actually, let me just set it. So I guess I'll go through this. So anything that is applied to HTML will be applied to everything else. So if I set this font size to, I think it's default 16 pixels. I don't think anything should change. Oops, I closed it. Oh, why is it mad at me? Okay, yeah. So REM will scale off of that. So if I put one REM, where did it go? And I look at it, its height is actually now 16 because the base font size, or like the and what is it like? It's like the HTML font size is 16 pixels, right? So if I put 2 REM, well, that's going to be 2 times the font size, so it's 32. And then if I put 4, then it's 64, and so on. So that's REM, pretty simple. And you can also put decimal points. So like if I put 2.5, then it's going to be 30, 30, 40. It's going to be 40, right? Yeah. So that's just math. And that's pretty nice because let's say I change the font size dynamically, then this will also change height. Okay. The next one is VW/H. And actually, since I'm using, or since I'm changing the height, I'm going to use VH. So VH stands for Viewport Height. VW stands for Viewport Width. So actually, Viewport is what the user sees. So it's like from this top corner to this bottom corner. It's like this would be my viewport right now. And of course, I can resize it, right? So like if I change this, the viewport would increase in height. So I'm gonna make this height 20. 20 VH. So actually this is like 20% of the viewport height, I think. Yeah. And so now it's 20% of from this top part to the bottom part. I cannot verify that. Actually, I can make it 100 and you can see 100 viewport height. So if I scroll to the top, so it's like basically touching the top, right? And this one is basically touching the bottom. I think it goes a little over just because, and notice how like, if it's here, right, it's like a very tiny little thing. But if I expand this, it basically matches the size of the viewport. So yeah, let's not make it that ridiculous. Let's just do 10 viewport height. So yeah, if you look at it, as I shrink this, it gets smaller. And that's because it's matching 10% of this viewport. So the final common one is going to be percent. Percent box. So percentage is interesting because it's actually the percentage of the container that it's in. So here's the container. So if I make this, oh, actually, that's another thing. It'll only work if the container has a defined height. So notice how like this container, if I like expand this, right, the container itself, oops, that's not the container itself. This entire container will just expand along with this this one element actually, but it'll expand with the content inside. So obviously you can't take a percent of something that keeps changing like that, because like if I make this like 10%, then the box will expand and I have to recalculate it. So this needs to be a specific height. So actually I'm gonna set that up here. So the name of the box is CSS units. I'm gonna set height to, let's say 300 pixels. That's might be too much. Okay, yeah, that's fine. So now this container is 300 pixels. And actually, if this element can actually go outside. But anyways, if I set the height to be 10%, right? So it'll be 10% of the height of the container. And so this container is 300 pixels, and so this height should be 30. Yes, and it is. Cool. So again, percentage. That's pretty simple. So that's how our like style sheet is getting pretty long. That's why CSS is so messy, because it just gets longer and longer as you go on. Okay. Next thing is. Okay, so this is where I'm actually going to start like formatting and adding a lot of random attributes. So yes, let me just kind of go back over what we talked about. So box model, right? You have first the side width and height, then you have padding, border, and margin on the very outside. And actually, I don't know if I covered this, but notice how the margin, if I make it really big, like if I make it like 40 pixels, right? Notice how like the background color actually doesn't intrude over the margin. So like the background color stops at the border. And so again, that's a good reason why to use either one. So I talked about the box model and then basic CSS selectors. So we have the element, we have the class, and then we have the IDs. Then we have chaining. So how do you combine these selectors that I've explained? And then how do you apply formats to both, or like to ones that have only have both class names, right? So yes, and class names are like very commonly used because you can do things with that. You obviously can't do this with IDs because everything can only have one ID. And then finally, I went over units. So pixel relative to the text size, viewport relative, and then percent relative. Okay, so now this is actually formatting things. So I'm going to, I know this says only div and p, but I'm going to format all 4 of these. So this is actually an A element, as shown right here. Yes, so I have a div, I have a p, a button, and an A. And that's how the div holds the text, just like the p element. Except, since I formatted the p element up here, it's Comic Sans. But anyways, so for divs, what can you do? What did I name this div? Dot div formatting. So, I mean, you've already seen the box model, right? So you can give it width. Let's just use pixels because that's the simplest. Height, under pixels. We can give it a padding. Okay, actually, if you notice here, it suggests padding left, top, bottom, right. If you just put one number, so let's say padding, I want 10 pixels. Actually, let me add a background color really quickly, just so you can see it. Let's make it, that's a good color. That's probably not a good color, but anyways. So if you look at it, if I only put one, that means this applies to every side. Actually, you can see in this little box model, it shows padding is 10 on all sides. However, if I add another one, then notice how this first one applies to the top and the bottom, and the second one applies to the left and the right. And if I add a third and fourth one, let's just make them ridiculously big so it's obvious. So yeah, so it goes in a clockwise order from starting from the top. So it's top, right, bottom, left, which might be a little confusing. But yeah, that's how that works. So let's say I only want to change the top to like 40, right? So then I can use a padding dash top. And so now the top is 40, but the bottom is still 10, and the left and right are still 10. And so actually order does matter in this case, since notice how like my padding top is now being overridden by this. So it just goes down in order of significance. Yes, but basically when the browser gets this, it'll expand it automatically to like padding top, left, right, and bottom. Okay, cool. So padding, remember, includes the color. Then you have border, 1 pixel. Again, border is also combining three of these attributes. Why not? So again, if I change like border width to like 5 pixels, that will override that. And then actually, here's something I didn't show before, border radius. So you're like, why does the border have a radius? If you've done any like graphic design, let's give a border radius of 5 pixels. So if you look very closely, the corners are rounded. If I make this even bigger, like 25 pixels, there you go. Now you can really see it. And I think it's like 25 pixels from the end to where the border radius ends. So if the width is 100, oh no, I think it's half of that. I don't know. There's some math that goes into it, but anyways, yeah. And if you make the border radius big enough, I think I might make the same as my width. Yeah, it's a circle. So you can make circles like that. But anyways, yeah, so that's border radius. That's all the border stuff. Width, height padding. Did I miss anything? And then of course you can add a margin too. Right, and so it pushes away from everything with its little margin. So that's a nice looking div. Again, obviously you can configure background color. You can also do the text color that I showed before. So let's say this is like a really dark color. What's a dark color? Or like a hard to read background with black text. I guess dark red might be hard to read. Yeah, it's hard to read that black text. So let's say I want to set to white. And actually I'm going to use FFF. So yeah, now it is white text. So that works. And actually, if you put a P element in it, this applies to that. Let me think. What else is there in divs? There's a bunch of display stuff, but I will explain that here. Display, you can do display position, and then obviously Flexbox. But yeah, div is pretty simple, I think, yeah. All right, P elements, P formatting. So P elements are, again, the text element. So you can add all of these to P element, and actually I'm gonna just show that. If I add all of those to P element, it looks almost exactly like the div element. Actually, no, I'm pretty sure it's the same, except for Comic Sans, obviously. But with the text, actually, okay, I should specify, I guess. Technically, the tag doesn't matter. All of these can be applied to elements. There are a few special HTML tags, like an input box, which is like, the text field that you can type in. But most of them actually can be formatted all the same way. But as for the text specific things, one of them is text align. So if I do text align center, notice how it's like in the center of this box as opposed to left align. And actually I can right align it too. So now it's right aligned. And so that's nice for doing, oops, I should have the padding. That's nice for just align things within the box. So especially if you just have text, the text align is what you want to use. Of course, there's many other ways to align things. Text decoration. I don't think I use any of these other ones. And then you have font. So I've already showed font family and font size. Those are pretty standard. There is a font weight. So it goes from, actually it explains it down there. You can have thin. Oh, well, it's Comic Sans, so you actually can't see it. So let me change the font family to something that actually has impact. Oh wait, no, impact also doesn't have it. What is a normal font? Arial is a normal font. Please have different font weights. So if I change this to like 700, yeah, so now it's like darker. And so this is like the boldness of a text. And let me pull up here. Actually, it's down here. So a really good resource is to find every single font you ever need is Google Fonts. If you just go to fonts.google.com, oh, okay, yeah, here we go. So it it has a ton of fonts, like, yeah, but like I think this is sorted by just trending right now, so that's actually pretty useful. But I like Roboto because Roboto is a very readable font, and it also has a lot of these different styles. So I'm going to add, oh no. So let's say I wanted to add 100, 300, and 400, right? So there's two ways to add external fonts. One is you can use a link. Remember, link is to link, you can include external content, or there's actually an import statement in CSS. So let me just copy and paste this at the top. So if you look at this long statement, or actually no, it's not really a long statement. This is all the URL from Google. but essentially you can import a URL. And so now, notice it says down here, use CSS rules to specify. If I set font family to Roboto, and then again, it wants a fallback font, and that's generally a good practice. Now, if you look at it, it's Roboto, and it actually looks pretty nice. Set to 100. It's very thin. Might be a little too thin. Let's set to our beefy, like, what was it, 400? I think I put 400, yeah. So that actually looks pretty nice. And then you can combine this with some other properties. Actually, for thin fonts, you want them really big. I think it's like the Apple-esque style. If I also set their font size to like 24, or actually we can use the REM. So like the default font size is 16, right? So let's say I want to set the font size to 2 times the default size. Well, yeah, and now it looks really clean. I think this is one of like the modern fonts. But anyways, yeah, so that's kind of messing with the font stuff. Is there anything else in font? This, I don't know. Again, there's a lot of things that I've never used. Font style italic. Oh, okay, you can italicize it. But I didn't actually install the italic font, so it defaulted back to the original font weight, which kind of looks ugly. But yeah, so that's like a lot of the text stuff. Buttons, actually, buttons are, well, again, everything can be formatted to look at it like a button. It just looks a little different at the beginning. And notice actually, oh, I will explain how you do the hovering thing. By default, when you hover over it, it turns slightly blue, and it does that. Which is cool, I guess, but we can make it look cooler. So how do I format a button? First, let's just give it a width, 100 pixels, height is 50 pixels. Save, okay, okay. Then I want font family to be Roboto, and sans serif. I want font weight to be like, let's do 200 because the font's a little small. Actually, I'm going to double these. That's not doubling. Font, yeah, font weight will be 200. Font size will be 1.5 rem. I think that should fit. Yeah, okay. So now our button looks like that, right? The hovering thing is still the same. So again, all of this is like formatting a div. Like all of these can be applied to this, and it would look the same. And honestly, the hover thing we can also do for these. But I'm gonna make our button look a little nicer. So I'm gonna do border. So if you notice, it has a tiny border. I'm gonna make it none. None. Now it has no border. And actually, when I hover over it, it no longer does the thing. However, I can still click on it as it's high. And actually, if you like click and hold, or it's like if you focus on it, right? It'll still have a little outline, but that's okay. So now here's one of my favorite properties, box shadow. So box shadow basically adds like a drop shadow underneath it. I'm not going to fully explain all of these, but essentially it is X offset, Y offset, and then the blur. So the blur is an important part because we're going to look blurry, so it looks like a cool shadow. And then I'm going to make the color AAA. Oh, wait. Background color is white. All right, so now, actually, let me make this a little more so it looks cool. Yeah, so now this is like what you see a lot. Yeah, okay, so now it's just like a quote unquote modern looking button. I guess let me add some margin to it so it's not so margin so close to the edge. Actually, I just need left. Yeah, okay, so yeah, now it looks like a legit button. But when I hover over it, the user doesn't know it's a button. Like, I mean, I could, again, format all of these to look like that. So what we need is for something to happen when we hover over it. And so this is what they call a pseudo-selector. Use the colon hover. And this is like the most commonly one used. So basically, what do we want it to look like when we hover over it? Well, let's increase the box shadow for first and foremost. Let's make this 5 pixels still, but let's make it darker, right? So 999. So now when I hover over it, it gets darker, and it like actually looks like I'm hovering over it. But there's two other things that I want to do to make it look even better. So the first one is this thing. It's called cursor pointer. So what is this? Essentially, it's what cursor do I want when I'm hovering over it? And so if I hover over it now, like it becomes a little hand. And so these are like href things, right? Like so the links have that by default, but buttons don't. And so like now when the user hovers over it, they're like, oh, I should click it. Cool. So yeah. Then one last thing. This is just kind of a it makes it look prettier. We have a property called transition. And so you can specify like box shadow, like exactly what you want to transition, or you can just give a general transition. So now it's going to take 0.2 seconds to change from this to this. And if I hover over it, oh, so you can just play around with all of these. But yeah, now it looks like a cool button. And then when I click on it, I mean, something should happen. Because again, it's weird for the user. Where's my button? It's weird for the user if there's no on click, because then they're just like clicking a button and nothing is happening. And they're like, what is happening? So yeah, having the on click thing is nice, even if it's just an alert box. So yeah, that's kind of what you can do with a button. Cool. And then the last thing is this link, right? So actually the link has a lot, if you look at it, if you just look at it, right, it's underlined. If you hover over it, you have a little pointy hand, and it actually has a color itself. This is named ext font. I don't know why it's that. Oops. Okay, so what do I want to do with the link? Did I? Oh, I'm gonna explain it here, but essentially for a link, it's the biggest thing is the text decoration, I think. So the text decoration is the underlined thing. So if I set it to none, then it's not underlined anymore, which is a good or bad thing, I guess. Sometimes you do want underlined, but let's say font size is 15 pixels, and then you want color to be dark turquoise. Let's just say, save. Yeah, so now you have this link, right? And when you hover over it, you can actually see there's a thing at the bottom. And so if you click on it, obviously it'll take you to this page. But again, just like the button, we want something to happen when you hover over it. So as with the button, you can do hover, hover. And so let's change the color to like dark slate gray. Why not? And then we want to add a transition. Let's go for 0.3, make it a little slower. So yeah, when you hover over it, now it changes to something. Maybe not dark slate gray, because that's really close to black. Let's make it green. So when you hover, it turns green now. So yeah, adding just like a hover thing and like a small transition can make it look a lot better. Than some of these rather uglier looking things. So yeah, those are like the standard formatting things that I use a ton. All right, so I guess this is, oh, I said advanced there, but this is one of the most important and one of the most difficult parts of CSS, in my opinion. I think everyone who did web dev or does web dev will agree. Because essentially what happened. Essentially, this is how you position things in a page. So if you notice, all of these are just kind of everywhere. Actually, not everywhere. It's just like goes down the page, right? So it's like one thing after another, which is fine. But with display and position, you can specify exactly where. Okay, so display versus position. So I'm going to talk about position first because position is kind of what you see here. Or I guess position is easier to understand. So everything is currently statically positioned by default, actually. So if you notice, all of these are like one after each other. This is an exception. I'll explain that. But they're all like in the same box, right? So like if I add a margin to this will kind of shift down and this will shift, or like this will push everything away. So that's statically positioned. Then we have not absolutely positioned, fixed. um, so what is fixed? Fixed, if you ever see like a menu bar at the top or like a really annoying pop-up that goes on the bottom that you can't scroll past, that's fixed positioning. So if I position this div, I named it fixed div. So if I dot fixed div, um, so if I had, let's say, okay, well, actually, here you go. It's the keyword position, right? So, so these are the main ones that I'm going to explain. So we want it to be fixed. So if I just save, it's now gone. And actually, I have no idea where it went. But essentially, it's no longer in this static view, right? So what can you do, or like, how do you position it to be fixed? So it is top. So you can have top, you can have left. The other two, as you might have guessed, is right and bottom. So let's say I want a pop-up in the corner because, yeah. So let's say from the bottom, it's 10 pixels, and from the right, it's 10 pixels, and then we're just going to give it a background color of like rosy brown. I'm learning many new things. So now it appears here. Hey, look. So it's 10 pixels from the right, and it's 10 pixels from the bottom. And actually, if I inspect element, notice how there's no margin or padding or anything that's working on it. But actually, oh, Firefox does show it. It shows that it's fixed. And see, you can see it's 10 pixels from the bottom and 10 pixels from the right. And notice, look, when I scroll, it's still there. Just annoyingly in the corner, always there. And if I change the font size to something obnoxiously big, it's still there and it's going to cover things. And actually, I guess this is a good time as any to explain what happens if things are layered. Because with a static view, right, nothing can be layered because they're all right after each other. But like this is like over some text. So what if I have another fixed thing, right? This is div 2. So what if this background color is like green? Oh, okay. Wait a second. Let me organize it so it goes behind. Okay, yeah. So now that high that you saw is behind here, right? So how do I get it in front? So with all these positions, it's like X and Y, right? However, there's a Z, right? A 3D plane. And so everything by default has a Z index of 1. I'm gonna play here. So this Z index is basically which Z plane is on. So I can give it any number. I can give it 10, I can give it 1,000, I can give it 1,000,000. But essentially now its Z index is 10, so it'll be over. Let's say this one has a Z index of like 100. So then this won't be over. And so that's how you can layer things on your site. Anyways, now we have 2 annoying elements with this one on top of the other one. And let's move it up to 15. So now it's slightly misaligned. Cool. So that is fixed positioning. Then we have relative positioning. So these are a little harder to understand, I think. So relative positioning is relative to where it is in the static position. So if I did position relative, and then I did top 10 pixels. Yeah, so notice how the space is still there. Nothing else moved. Because essentially the space allocated for this div is still there. However, now it's just moved slightly from that position. And so it kind of becomes an absolute position thing, which I'll explain in a second. But yeah, that's relative. I don't like moving it from the top. Let's left. It's basically from the left of where it's supposed to be, we can move it 10 pixels over. So look, now it's indented. Okay, so absolute position. So absolute position will position itself. It'll fix it. It'll be fixed position, except it's relative to its what is it, like closest positioned ancestor. So for this case, I'm actually going to set the position of this box. This will be position relative. So if you do position relative and don't change anything else, notice how it actually is, it functions the same as static. However, now if I did absolute position, where's that? Absolute div. Now this absolutely position thing, if I did top 0, left 20 pixels. Hello. Is it not called absolute div? Oh, maybe this container needs a container. Hello. Maybe it needs a width and height. Let me give it a width and height, and that might fix it. Width is 100%. Height is 1,000 pixels. Is that overkill? Oh, that's overkill. 500 pixels. Okay. Oh, oops. Oh, no, that's right. Why aren't you? Okay, so I'm now debugging. Okay, so it's complaining because oops, I forgot to do, I forgot to actually set its position. So now this is absolutely, oh, okay, yeah. So notice how it bases itself off of this container, right? So it is now 20 pixels from the left of the container and 0 pixels from the top. So if I make it like 200 pixels and then 20 pixels. So now compared to the top left corner of this box, it is 20 pixels from the top and 200 pixels from the left. So yes, that is absolute positioning. I didn't even do relative. Okay. Oh, I did explain relative. Oops. And then finally you have sticky. So sticky acts like static until it hits the top, and then it's not static. And then it's fixed, which is actually pretty interesting. Position. I might have forgotten how to do this. I might have to search up sticky. Top 0. Okay, cool. I know how to do it. Background color is salmon, because salmon is actually a nice color. So here's our div, right? Basically, once it touches the top, it will become fixed. So we were scrolling and look, it touched the top. So now it's stuck there. And it will continuously be stuck there until it leaves that top. So actually I can set this to like something that's not the very top. So let's say 20, right? So look, now it's 20 pixels from the top. And that is used in many places, I think. One of the things is like a header that can be sticky. Anyways, those are the position properties. Display, okay. Then display. I think this is the last thing. I mean, I can explain the advanced features. But display, so there are a bunch of different displays. And actually, display flex and display grid are also in there. But I'm going to explain the two most common ones, technically three. So display block, right? Everything is by default in display block too, or not everything. Divs, headings, and p elements are all by default display block. So let's say you wanted to write a play, right, where you have one person speak and then you have the next person speak. Obviously, you would want them like in a block, or like they would act, or like they would fall in one after another. However, what if you have this and you want them both on the same line? Well, then you would do display inline dot inline text display inline. Hello. Why is it not inlining? Oh yeah, here we go. And so now these are both on the same line. All right. Even though they're two different elements, notice how, so yeah, you have element one and then you have element two, and actually it puts in the white space element. But anyways, yeah, so these are two separate elements that are now inline. So that's cool. And actually, now I can explain this. So actually, all link elements are inline by default. Why is that? Because let's say you wanted to put an A element inside a paragraph tag. href is equal to XYZ. All right. Website. So like, okay, yeah. So see, without having to format it, actually, this is formatted. Let me just get rid of this really quickly. So without having to format it, this Word website is already inline. And so that just saves you a little bit of CSS, I guess. Of course, you can click on it and it goes somewhere. And then the last thing, is display none. So let's say you want to hide something. And this is used a lot when you want to like, when you have like, let's say you have a drop-down menu, right? Obviously you want it to be hidden initially, and then you can show it later. Actually, let me add a div. And so if I set this to display none, what is it? Dot display. Display done. So now it's completely gone. Like, it doesn't even leave space for it. However, you can see it. I think you can see it. Yeah, you can still see it here. And so it's if you have like sensitive information, you probably shouldn't just do display none and be happy with it, because the user can still see it. There's actually another thing to make it go bye-bye, and it's visibility hidden. However, if you think about the way it's phrased, hidden means it's still there. So like think of an invisible person, like they're still there. But there's just like empty space now. So people can't see it, but it's still there. So those are two different ones, and you can interchange. However, be careful, because if you have like an invisible button, people can still click on that button. So yeah, that's display none. I think I just set the height of that. Anyways, we're gonna have these annoying things here for the rest of the time. Okay, so that's all the basic things. Again, Google. Let me format the external link so it doesn't look so ugly. What is it called? ext link. .ext link. Margin 5 pixel 0. Font size 1.5 rem. Display block. So now they're not like that ugly. Okay, at least they're kind of. Why is this small? Oh, oops. Yeah. Okay. So now these are all here. So I guess before I explain the advanced ones, these are. I think W3 Schools is honestly the best reference. So if you look at this, it has basically everything. Everything from just the basic syntax, selectors, to colors, to like, it explains the box model. of course. It has, let's say you want to format lists, right? I didn't go over that, but you can format lists, and it'll explain these, it'll show code examples, and you can even try it yourself, or it gives you like this little code editor, which I think is really cool. It goes really in depth. Anyway, so that's a really good example or resource. The other good resource is Stack Overflow. For example, how to center an element horizontally and vertically. Someone has asked this question 7 years ago, and now you're asking the question. Well, it's here. And actually, if you search a lot of things on Google, Stack Overflow, a lot of coding things, Stack Overflow shows up a lot. So you have the person asking a question, and then you have the one really good answer, which gives you like multiple approaches. And you have some bad answers, which people downvote. Anyways, yeah, so those are probably the two most useful. I will go over Flexbox like right after this, but CSS Tricks also has some pretty cool articles. And actually, these two in particular about Flexbox because it has really cool pictures, and Grid, which doesn't have pictures. Sad. Oh, it does. It has a few pictures. But yeah, this is also a good resource. But I mean, as long as it's not from like a shady website. Um, because a lot of these things also go over like good practices to use. Because again, CSS is pretty easy to get it's not pretty easy, but it's easier to get something to work than it is to make it work well and how is it easy to read. Because like if you look at the CSS I've written, oh my gosh. No one can read this going back through it. I don't even think I can read it going back through it. So yeah, that's why CSS is hard to format, and that's why a lot of people don't like writing it because it's just the best. Okay, Flexbox. I'm already like kind of over. I'll go for like 15 minutes, so I kind of go fast. Did I add my Flexbox stuff? I did. Okay, cool. So here is a menu, right? Let's say I want a bar at the top, or we're not gonna put it at the top, but assuming we have a bar at the top, this is like one of those standard menu bars that you see. It has a bunch of links. So let's say I want to go to HTML basics, it'll actually take me to HTML basics. Anyways, yeah. So how do I make this menu into a Flexbox? Dot. Hello. Dot menu display flex. So display flex will automatically make it into a Flexbox. And notice all of the margins disappeared. But anyways, the most important, or like not most important, but the first thing you want to set is flex direction. So Flexboxes are essentially 1D arrays. So you can have it go in a row or in a column. So for this one, it's going to be row. All right, so it'll be flexible in a row. And actually, let me just show column. Column, yeah, it's just a column. And actually, I like using Flexboxes because you can actually see the Flexbox. So if I inspect element here, flex. And so I think it's in computer. No, I don't know where it is. Oh, it's at the top here. I guess this isn't as helpful as this, but if you look at it, let me just set the font to a little bigger just so you can see it clear. If I set font size like 2 rem. Alright, cool. So basically, this is like the free space in your Flexbox, and here are all the flex items. So there are a lot of really nuanced things that you could do. Here are just some important ones, I guess. Justify content. So this is how do you want things to align in the parent box. So right now it's doing flex start. So if I do flex end, they'll all go to the end. If I do center, they'll all be around the center. Some other fun ones are space around. So this will create space around every element, or space between, which is basically the same, except it won't add space to the ends. So this is actually a pretty nice view. If I turn off the overlay, yeah, it looks nice already. So then let's say I have a width. No, I have a height of like 30 pixels. Oops, that's too small. 50 pixels. Right. So now, give me a second. Dot menu item height is auto. So does this not do it? Oh, maybe not. Well, there's align items. Oh wait, no, it does do it. Okay, cool. So basically, what align items does is it aligns it in the direction perpendicular to the flex direction. And so, yeah, so that's how you would center if like your menu is bigger somehow. Cool. And then you can actually customize like individual ones. I think there's a align self to top. I know. Oh. Oh wait, no. Menu item apply. Oops. Menu item applies to all of them. Let's say this is ID equals about. So now about, you have align self to baseline. And so now this will align it, well, baseline, I guess is the top. Let's back to element. So yeah, now it's aligned to the top. So there's a lot of other really cool things you can do with Flexbox. And again, it's pretty flexible, as the name suggests. So I just suggest you, if you really want to like do something with it, use that. Here's a link. The CSS tricks Flexbox, yeah, it has so much. But yeah, see, it'll tell you display, flex direction, flex wrap, and then it like outlines it for you, or like it draws the picture, and it's so cool. Okay, I guess we should go on to grid now. So grid is the other really powerful CSS display thing. So notice how like I didn't actually write any content in the grid, unlike this, because I'm actually going to demonstrate a layout. So I think here, I'll just search them. Let me search up CSS grid. Again, W3 schools, very nice. So you can do something like this, which is actually kind of what I'm going to do. So actually, let's name this header. So we have three things. We have a header, we have a left side, and we have main dash content. And so all these things have, oh yeah, so all these things need to be positioned somewhere, right? And so grid can do that for us. Let me just give them all background colors so you can see exactly where they are. Normally you'd have stuff in them, obviously. So our header will be sienna. Our main thing will be sky blue, which I don't think is that blue. And then our, oh wait, no, that's the left side. And our main content will be tomato. These are interesting color names. So right now, obviously you can't see anything because these divs have nothing in them. And so they have a height of 0. Like all of them have a height of 0, which is a little sad. So what can we do? Well, in this is, I named it .site layout. .site layout. We can do display grid. So just a review over the HTML. So I have this parent, which is called site layout, and then it has these 3 elements in it. And so with a display grid, there are a lot of interesting things you can do. But what I just tend to do is grid template columns and grid template rows. And so essentially what this is it creates a template. Let me outline it really quickly and then I'll show you. So let's set the width to 100%, why not? And then the height will be 40 viewport height, If I won't change the height. Oh, look, now it shows up. So right now, by default, it's just one grid after another, which is okay, I guess. But we have grid, template, columns. So what do we want for our columns? Well, we want our first, or okay, wait, actually, let's do rows first because rows is simpler. So we're thinking we have a header, and then we have a thing on the left, and then we have our main content. So for rows, we have a 10% header, and then we have a 90% content box. So yeah, you can look at that. I already did that. So we have our header, it's a little small, but it's okay, which is 10% of the height, and then we have something that's 90% of the height. And then I'll do grid template columns. So our first column is just going to be the left box. Let's say I want that 30%, and the next one is just 70%. Okay, so it looks a little weird, but I will fix it in a second. Actually, another unit very specific to this is FR. That's just remaining free space. And so by doing that, it's actually, I can also do that for here, right? It'll be the same thing. So I'll basically say how much free space is left. So let's say if I have 2, it'll actually distribute it. Oh, here we go. Here's a little grid view. So it'll actually distribute it between the rest. But I only want 1 for now. So now we have like kind of a grid, but unfortunately they're not placed in the right place. And so this is where the grid kind of comes in handy. So what we do is we say, for this item, for the header, we do grid row. Actually, no. Actually, yeah, I'll just write all this out. So grid row start, we'll start at grid number 1. Grid start counting from 1, not 0, unfortunately. And then grid row span. Oh wait, is it not span? Oh wait, no. You can do this. So grid row end, and then you can have span. So essentially, span will calculate it. So this is saying start from the first grid, the start of the first grid, and then span across 2 grids. This is, I typed row, right? This should be column. So now look, this header spans across both columns, and these just fill in automatically, but it's nice to column start. It's nice to explicitly define these. Grid row start. So this one starts on row 2. Right, and by default, the end will be just span 1. Of course, this is correct, so you technically don't need these. But yeah, now like it's like a nice little grid. All we had to do was kind of, these are like very precise. There's no like jank fiddling around. So that's why grid is like a really nice thing to use. Cool. Animations. I won't go too far in depth because I'm kind of out of time. But animations, essentially, let's say I have a box. Dot box to animate. Let's set width to 100 pixels and height 200 pixels too. And then border, no. Background color to this violet color. Right, so we have a little box. And so, what do we want to do with the box? I guess we just want to, I'll just like expand it. So how do you define animations? It's with the at. So at is like special command. So if you remember at the top, we have at import. So now we have at keyframes. And then you name it. So this is kind of like a function. So let's just say like expand. Expand box. So what can you do? You can do, I think you can do, wait. Yeah, so you can have from something to something. So inside, these are all just positions. So let's say from width 100 pixels to width of 500 pixels. Right, and so okay, so now we have these keyframes, but how do we actually apply it? So then we have a bunch of animation things. So the important one is animation name. So obviously this should call the same animation quote unquote function. And of course you can have multiple different animations defined. Then animation duration. Animation duration. So this is how long the animation will last. So let's say we want it to last 3 seconds. If I save it, it expands. And then it goes back. So animation iteration count. Let's say I want to keep doing it, right? So now it's just going to keep doing it. Animation direction. So it's alternate. So now what I'll do is I'll keep going back and forth. I think it will. Yeah. So go back and forth. Animation timing function. So what the timing function is basically like how fast do you want to go from this to this. So I think if I make it linear, it'll go linearly. And there's a ton of things you can do with the animation. I'm not gonna go through all of it, but yeah, that's like a simple animation. And then finally, these are some good links to go over. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I don't have any questions. I know I could have just rambled on for a while. Oh, it's a lot of CSS. Yeah, thanks for coming. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll probably just push this to the same code sandbox, and you can like mess around with it too.
Oh, yeah, Michael, afterwards, can you give me the link? Maybe I'll just put in the video description or something.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I don't know how long they'll cache the website. Probably not for too long, right?
Which one?
The code sample. Like if you give it a link.
Oh, I have it deployed on like a GitHub pages.
Ooh, okay.
So yeah, anyways, yeah. I think that's it. Again, just if you ever need help on CSS, just Google it. That's the best way to figure out things and practice. Okay, yep, that's it. Thanks for coming, everyone.